Hello, good morning, students. Today, once again, we are going to discuss the functions in Python. In the first video, I have explained to you the importance of Python functions as well as how can you define the function. If you have seen that video, then little bit idea will be there that how we can write the function. Now, in this video, I'll just explain to you a more advanced feature of function with arguments or parameters. User defined function, what we are discussing in this topic, can be categorized in two different ways. The first one is the function without parameters, and the second one, the function with parameters. Example, here first example, a function without parameters. Without parameters means when we are defining a function without any variable in the function prototype. It means if you have defined this function here and with the parenthesis of this function, this is the parenthesis of this function, if you have not defined any variable, then this function will be called function without arguments or without parameters. So as yesterday also we have discussed the function without parameters, how we will write and how we will call it and how we will execute it. So here very simple, once again I am writing a simple program of factorial. So just define a function factorial, def factorial, then take one variable, this one is a float, this one is a fact equal to 1, and the x equal to integer input, enter any number. Then again we have to give the logic to calculate the factorial. As you know, in class 11th we have discussed how to calculate the factorial. Once again I'm explaining you. Here you have to write for I in range 1 comma x plus 1, fact equal to fact cross I, and then print fact. The factorial program, if you have gone through it, then you can understand. Then the second step, we have to call the factorial function here. So what will happen? This function once again will be called at this place and will be executed here. It will ask you to enter any number, and suppose if you have given a 5, then it will give its factorial. This is 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1 equal to 120. Or in reverse you can write it also, 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5. The main thing is that logic you can give in any way. So I am giving a simple logic to multiply the number from 1 to n or 1 to x. So here this is a simple program, function without argument. Now the next concept is function with parameter or with argument. The parameters are those variables used to pass the values from one function to another function. It means, what is the importance of parameter? First we should know that why we are using a parameter. When we want to pass the values from one function to another function, then we have to use a parameter. Suppose you have two students, one student is this one, another student is this one. If you are throwing a ball from here to here, then you have your hands and the other person also hands to receive. So from one hand you are throwing the ball, the other hand is receiving the ball. It means we must have the things to send as well as to receive, then only the communication will be taken place. In the same way, when we are doing the function with argument, it means that we want to pass the values of one function into another function. In the next example, I will explain to you this very clearly. Now here, the types of parameters are the formal parameters, the second one is actual parameters, and the third one is a default parameter. Once again, I'll tell you that what is the importance of parameter: to pass the values from one function to another function. And now these are the three different ways to pass the values. Now see one by one. The formal parameters, the definition, first I'll give you the definitions. The formal parameters. Formal parameters are written in the function prototype or with function header of the definition. These variables will be treated as a local variable of that particular function. Example is here. Suppose define sum x comma y. Now here you see that when we are defining the function prototype or when we are defining the function, here at this time we are defining these two variables x and y. So these variables will be treated as a parameter, and the name of these two is a formal parameter. Why the formal parameter? Then in next example I'll explain to you very clearly. The second one is a actual parameter. These are the variables through which actual values will be passed when we are calling the function. Once again, now you have defined these variables x and y. Now we should pass the values to these variables. So through the actual parameters, we will pass the values to these formal parameters. How we will explain? I will explain you through the example. Now the next one is a default parameter. These are the parameters with default values. When we are defining the body of the function, the prototype of the function, at that time, if we are giving the value, it means the value during the declaration time, then that type of variable will be treated as default parameter. That type of variable will be treated as a default parameter. This is a default parameter. I hope it should be clear that three types of parameters are there. You have the formal parameters, you have the actual parameters, and you have the third one, you have a default parameters. Now I will explain you through the example. For actual and formal parameters, you see here the example. The first example, in previous video you have calculated the sum of two variables, the function without argument. We were not using with the arguments, as the definition of that function was like this definition, this sum, this one only, no parameters were there. But here we are using the parameters a and b. These two are the parameters here, and here you have now written c equal to a plus b and print c. Now when we are calling it, now remember here you see, when you are calling it, first you should have these two values. Before calling the function with argument, you should have the values of the argument. It means when you are calling this function now, this sum function when you are calling here, so before calling this function we should have these values x and y, through which we can pass this x to this a and this y can be passed to this b. I think it should be clear. So we will give the value of x, we will give the value of y, and then we will call this function sum. We will pass x and y. This x will be received by a, this x will be received by a, this y will be received by b, and now this a and b are available there. So c equal to a plus b and print c. Here we have the concept function with argument. You have used the argument or the parameter a and b, x and y. A and b are here the formal parameters, and x and y are here the actual parameters. So the formal parameter will receive the value of the actual parameters. I think it should be clear. Now the next concept is concept of default parameters. Default parameter is nothing. When we are defining the prototype, at that time if you are giving the value default value, it means if you are assigning the value at that time, so this variable will be treated as a default parameter. Now what is the advantage of default parameter? You can see once again we are calling once we are giving the value of a, the value of b, and then we are calling sum. Now here you see that I have passed the a and b. This a and b, both values I have passed. So if you pass the value a and b, so this a will be passed to x and this b will be passed to y. So the next new value what you give, that will be received by the formal parameter and its original value will be overlapped by the new value. But in the next step, if you will see that I have given only one variable a, I have not given b. So only the first variable, this a, only the first value of a will be received by this x. So what will happen for the y? So very simple, the y have its own value. It means in the default argument, if you are giving your own value, so the default argument will receive your value, and if you are not giving the value, the default argument will use its own value. As in your phone, if you have the default ringtone, if you set your own ringtone, so the ringtone will be means whatever the ringtone you will set, that ringtone will be used. Otherwise the default ringtone will be used. In the same way, here the y is a default argument. If you pass the value to y, it will receive that value, and if you don't pass the value to y, it will receive simply its original value. And the next one is sum. I'm not passing here, so you cannot leave the blank if there are all the arguments are not default arguments. So this one is a wrong statement. It means you can leave only those variable when you are calling the function. Here you are calling the function, you can leave only those values which are not assigned. It means y equal to 5 is there, this is assigned, so you can leave that, but you cannot leave the value of x here because the x is not assigned. So x must be given, y can be left. Y means you cannot use y, or if you are not using y, so it will receive its own value, but x must be given. So I think it should be clear. Then the next, some assignments are there for you. You write a program to calculate the area of triangle, and you use function without argument and function with argument. Thank you very much. Next tomorrow once again I will post you, and till then you just go through this